Assalamu alaikum, and welcome once again to another episode of the New World Education Podcast. And today we are on episode 22. We're on our 22nd episode. And I think that this is phenomenal that we've been able to continue with what some may think is a very narrow topic, New World Education, based on and rooted in the divine teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Some people think, especially when you're talking about the supreme wisdom, some people think that it's a very limited uh, topic, but we are here to say that it literally spans the universe. And of course, we want to thank our sponsor, the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, for sponsoring this podcast. And at the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, their tagline is education at the speed of thought, because it's dealing with primarily education online, something that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been asking us to do since 2003. And at the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, we believe that this is the modern equipment that Master Fard Muhammad spoke of when he mentioned modern equipment in the Supreme Wisdom Lessons problem book. Of course, I would like to thank my co-host for joining me on the set today. We have Sister Deborah Muhammad, who is our program manager, sound engineer, and also our co-host. And we have Sister Gabrielle Muhammad, who is our co-host and our resident researcher. So today we are going to get into another one of the schools of that's in the Supreme Wisdom curriculum, and this is the School of Mathematic, Language, Arts, and Sciences. And we're going to discuss as it relates to this, we're going to deal with how do you use language from a mathematical perspective, or the mathematical use of language. And we're going to talk about how language has the power to free you, and language has the power to enslave you. So we're going to get into some of the, I guess, the ins and outs about this mathematic language that Master Fard Muhammad he spoke about in one of the problems in the problem book. And we're going to bring some evidences and some things to bear as it relates to that, to prove at no limit of time what Master Fard Muhammad has taught us is true. And before we get into that, what we want to do is, of course, go into our current events. And Sister Gabrielle, if you could have that video queued up, and then we could play that first. Okay, so the first current event that we're going to deal with is it's an article from the New York Times, the section called "The Morning," and it's the article reads like this. It says, or the title is, "A Vaccine Shot? No, thank you," by David Leonhardt. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting. I know it's going to be very, very interesting to see the actual facts as it relates to this coronavirus vaccine. So let's go ahead and, of course, get into it. And I'm going to share my screen with you all so that we can see the article. And of course, as always, the article will be shared in the description box below. So if you want to go back and look at it, you can. Okay, let me just make sure I'm on the right screen here. And here we go. All right, so this article, as we said, is called, it starts off, It's from the New York Times, The Morning, February 19th, 2021, by David Leonhardt. Good morning. We look at the cost of vaccine alarmism. And of course, there's a vaccine, and you see the snow over there, but because of course, Allah is his judgment is on. And so with this weather that just came through, you know what? We'll come back to asking you all how you are this week, because we've had a very interesting week and I don't want to miss out on that. But I know a lot of times we take a lot of time up front, just really checking in, but let's go ahead and get into this and then we come back and check in if that's okay with you all. So anyway, so of course, with this weather systems 3 to be exact, that came through in this last week, it shut down a lot of the vaccine sites. And of course, there's a big push to get everyone vaccinated in America, in the world, quote unquote, to get herd immunity. But let's look and see what the actual facts are. It says a vaccine site in Connecticut, and that's what this is. And it has a stop sign there, this indicative of what this article is going to speak about. Vaccine shots, no thank you. If you are a regular reader of this newsletter, you're probably familiar with the idea of vaccine alarmism, okay? And it goes something like this. The coronavirus vaccines aren't 100% effective. Vaccinated people may still be contagious. And the virus variants may make everything worse. So don't change your behavior even if you get a shot. So in other words, still wear your mask, still social distance, and even though you took the shot. Much of this message has some basis in truth, but it is fundamentally misleading, the author says. But it's interesting how this article goes. It says the evidence so far suggests that a full dose of the vaccine with the appropriate waiting period after the second shot effectively eliminates the risk of COVID-19 deaths, which we know that is not true, because just the other day I heard somebody like yesterday died right after 30 minutes after they took their second shot. And they said that they were a little overweight, but they didn't have the other comorbidity, have the other things that they say that contribute to comorbidity, like diabetes and heart disease and whatnot. And it says, so it nearly eliminates the risk of hospitalization and drastically reduces a person's ability to affect someone else. This is not true. Not in all cases. And all of that is also true about the new virus's variant. Now, the virus's new variants, the article says. Yet the alarmists continue. And now we are seeing its real world costs, the author says. Many people don't want to get the vaccine, partly because it sounds so ineffectual. Now get ready for this. Get ready. About 1/3, they say here, of the US military have declined the vaccine shots. 1/3. When the shots first came available to Ohio nursing home workers, about 60% of nursing home workers said no. Some NBA stars are wary of appearing in public service ads encouraging vaccines. And then it says nationwide, get ready, nearly half of Americans would refuse the shot if offered one immediately, polls suggest. So that's 50% of the American people would reject one if they were offered one, according to the polls. And I'm gonna tell you a little anecdote right quick. I was in Walmart earlier today, and I heard it was an older couple. They may have been in their 60s, maybe early 70s, older white couple. And so this younger white woman was speaking with them, and she was talking about, well, when things get back to normal, or whatever normal is, I just can't wait. I don't know if it's when the weather gets better or whatever, she said, but I'll be glad when things get back to normal. And then they start talking about the vaccine. And she said, boy, she said, if it means that I have to take this vaccine for things to get back to normal, I am willing to do it. That's what she says. So the older guy says, well, I took my first vaccine. And his wife, she said, well, I didn't take it. She said, I'm not so sure about it. I have to do more research. And I kind of look like, that's interesting to see it all manifest right there in front of my eyes. So anyway, let's look at what the article continues to say. It says that vaccination skepticism is even higher among Black and Hispanic people. It says white people without a college degree, registered Republicans, and lower income households. Well, to me, that's just about, that's the masses of the people, really. And my husband and I were talking, and he's interacting with the public all the time. And he says it seems like the more educated of the people, and particularly the more educated Blacks, are the ones that are saying they're taking vaccines. He said, but the rest of the people, the brothers on the block and all, said they're not worried about that. And so it's just very, very interesting that, when they're pushing this vaccine, how many people really are not so down with it. And I don't have the article in front of me, but I believe it was Dr. Anthony Fauci said that the vaccine, that the UK variant may respond to a third round of vaccines. When he says that, of course, the South African one, they don't know about it. So now they're talking about putting more of the vaccine in people, to, try to, inoculate you against the UK variant. But then what happens? What happens when the next variant shows up? Because they said every 10 days, this virus mutates. So are you just going to keep getting these shots over and over and over again? When is enough enough? And is it really doing, is it really causative for the decrease in COVID cases? It's just so many things that we have to ask ourselves. And so with that being said, I want to, of course, bring us to this, what Sister Demoiselle shared last week. And this is a pamphlet that is being distributed by the Nation of Islam that deals with, it says, Farrakhan warns, do not take the experimental COVID-19 vaccine. And you should really get you a copy of this brochure if you don't have one. Of course, you could go to our website at noi.org, and we have lots of information about this COVID-19 vaccine. But this is our official stance in the Nation of Islam, is that we are not to take this experimental vaccine. So with that being said, now let's get to what's really important. How y'all doing? Like Wendy Williams says, how y'all doing?
As always, I'll let Sister Deborah go first.
Me? All right. I am doing good.
In spite of the cold weather. In spite of the cold weather, you froze.
Yes, in spite of the cold weather. Well, yeah.
See, you're doing just like the cold
here,
weather.
it hasn't been as bad.
You keep freezing. No, just like the cold weather. Okay, go ahead. So it's not as bad?
Oh, when I said it, no, not as bad as other places that I've seen. So with that being said, like I said in the beginning, I'm doing good. All praises due to Allah.
All praises due to Allah. Didn't have to work in that cold this week, huh?
No, even if we couldn't. I mean, once it's below 40, you can't paint. So
okay,
you can't paint in below 40. So even if it gets that cold, you still can't do anything.
Okay. Praise be to Allah. Thank Allah that you didn't have to go out and brave that weather. Okay, yes. Sister Gabrielle, how was your week been, ma'am?
Similarly, I'm very blessed. Yes. Because after watching the events that took place, and just we had a little power outage. We experienced some snow, and but all together, I just reflecting, I just realized how blessed we are, and I really can't complain. And I'm not saying that from saying that like a platitude. I can't complain and I'm blessed. No, I really had a moment where I really sat down and thought about these things, and that's, I can say that as well. Our praise is due to Allah that we were able to fare as well as we did, and even with some minor inconveniences, it only lasted for a few hours. So hey, I'm here, and it just so happened that I already had time off of school for Mardi Gras on the 2 days that the weather really had affected Baton Rouge. So I really didn't miss a beat.
Praise be to Allah. That's awesome. 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 Well, I'm like you. I had to start reflecting and thinking how grateful I feel for all that we have. I mean, you just really don't understand what you have until you don't have it. Like right now, I guess it's still pretty, it warmed up today and I'm thankful, but it's still pretty cold here. It's so cold to the degree, I just had to see the temperature. Actually, it says it's 56, but it's chilly where I am. But my car is still covered in ice. And on the other side of my house, it still has snow on the ground. So it's been pretty cool here. And, but when you think about my water burst, the pipe burst, and there was a plumber that came and got under the house in 24-degree weather to fix the pipe, and it was raining. And you just don't really think about how, much people do that goes unnoticed to make your life easier and more convenient. And that is enough to be thankful for. That's almost like when on the Matrix, when the Oracle talks about you don't notice things that are doing what they're meant to do. And so it's just like, I mean, think about the people that, like when our lights were out, the people that had to go up on electric poles and had the skill, one, but then had to leave their families and their lights may have been out and go up on a pole so that they could get the lights out on for other people. And I just really started thinking about how grateful I am for what people do, the things that go unnoticed. And so that was one of the takeaways that I took away from this. And not only that, being somewhat prepared. Now, for the South, no one expected something like this. This is almost like in Baton Rouge when it rained for 3 days, it flooded the whole city. It was a 1,000-year flood. But outside of, the unexpected, I'll have to say that I'm so grateful for the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to forewarn us to get prepared for, these things, these eventualities that were coming. Now, if Master Fard Muhammad understood what they call, well, I know he understood it, so it's not an if, what they call global warming, right? But according to our teachings, that the Son of Man makes all of this. So he could see down the line of time when this thing was going to happen because the Son of Man is the one making it. So, if you plan to do something and when you execute your plan, you're the one in the know, everybody else may not know. So I'm just saying that to say that in preparation for that, he told us and told us to tell other people to get prepared. So I'm just grateful that to some degree that I was prepared. So to a great degree, I was prepared for what may have happened. So let's go ahead and get into our topic for today. So we're going to start off with a clip from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he is going to speak to us about language. And this is a clip from the Healthy Family Initiative Summit that was in Atlanta, Georgia in 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead. Let me give you permission here to share and we'll go ahead and watch this clip right quick, and then we'll get into our topic.
But by the way, I just wanted to add this caveat that this is another one of my favorite lectures that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has done. And even he says it in the lecture that, you know, there's a lot of information for you wise ones to understand in that. So I suggest go back and watch this entire thing in its fullness. All righty. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. And you see all those those things that I have up there? I'm ready to discuss this language.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when he was among us, said that the Savior who came, Master Farrakhan Muhammad,
Slow it down.
Yeah, you gotta get down
40 miles
times
high.
10 speed.
Just
Yeah,
to
I know. I'm
teach
trying to pause it.
one man.
You know, I told you already.
Elijah Muhammad would say that.
My mind just
to
moves
us,
fast, you know.
that Master Farrakhan Muhammad loved us so much that he would eat rattlesnakes.
Okay, finally stop. But yeah, that's how I have to consume information. I have to consume it fast, or less my mind will go somewhere else, because I'm always thinking about multiple things at one time. Okay, back to human speed.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when he was among us, said that the Savior who came, Master Farrakhan Muhammad, said he would walk up a mountain 40 miles high just to teach one man. Elijah Muhammad would say that to us, that Master Farrakhan Muhammad loved us so much that he would eat rattlesnakes to free us. We met a man unlike no other man. We met a man whose father was an original black man who knew that the lost people were lost in the West among a new and strange people, the Caucasian people. He had to make a son that would go in among such people and not be discovered. So the scripture says he came without observation. He came in sinful flesh to condemn sin in the flesh. He came unto his own, but his own received him not. And the light shined in the darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. But the word that was in the heart of the originator became flesh. And that flesh dwelled among men. And that flesh, the Father went all over the world finding bits and pieces of knowledge to give to his Son, to prepare him for the job at hand. What was the job at hand? A job like no other job. A mission like no other mission. And what was that mission? To raise a dead nation to life. A people that belonged to God were taken out of the east, brought into the west, and made other than themselves. So this one that would come had to be prepared to redeem us, to pay the price, to relieve us of the tyranny of a tyrant. He would have to know how to extract his people from the clutches of an enemy. And out of that enemy produce a new mind from a new idea, a new man, a new woman that would be the origin of a new people and a new family. He studied 42 years, according to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. 42 years he studied to deliver us from the enemy. But listen to this. He visited every inhabited part of our planet. He spoke 16 languages and wrote 10 of them perfectly. Well, that ain't all the languages, is it? Teach on that. Well, there are core languages, out of which came other languages that are all dialects of the original languages. As a student, I studied Latin for 4 or 5 years. And Latin gave me a route into English. But the Latin language is now considered a dead language. Even languages die. But they give birth to other languages that come from that single root. So Latin is the mother of the Romance languages of our planet. Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian. I think those are the Romance languages. Latin, French, English, Latin, Spanish, Italian, French, and Portuguese. It is something. I'm going to get to the family that use these languages. Y'all have to pardon me today.
okay, that's where the clip ends, where he deals with language. But again, later in the lecture, there's more to be understood in the words. You're on mute, Sister Deborah.
Okay, yes, exactly. So that's where I want to go ahead and get started. So let's look at something that's in the lessons. Now, Sister Demoiselle, do you have that quote? Yeah, no? Okay. Well, we'll be able to kind of quote it about or around it. But in the lessons, in the problem book, as we mentioned, and this is where this this is where this school of study comes from, because all the schools of study are either derived, they're not just derived, they're base or standards that's already in the lessons, and or they're derived from the lessons, these particular schools of study. But one in particular is this mathematic, right? Language. And so that is the school that we have derived from the lessons called mathematic language. And we put language arts because that's something that we understand in this world, right? Language arts. But not just the way that is offered in the schools as we know, math or language arts is more than that. It's mathematic, language, arts, and sciences. Because what? One, he put the adjective mathematic in front of language. So that mathematic is an adjective that describes the language. So let's look up the word. Well, let me read this first. It says that there are 10 numbers in the mathematic language. And I think last week, Sister Gabrielle kind of went after it. I wouldn't say alluded to, but I think she kind of went directly after what one of these languages could refer to. And then it asked a question: if a student learns one letter per day, then how long will it take him to learn the 26 letters? So we offer one explanation about that, or we offered two explanations about what that could possibly mean. But let's look at this word or this phrase, mathematic language. So I have here pulled up, but I'll just read it for us. It doesn't, mathematic without an S is not necessarily a word itself that's used in the English language that we use in America, right? But it has it as an adjective to the word mathematical. And so when we look at the word mathematical, of course, it means relating to the study of mathematics, which is a branch of study of math. Now, it says here, it says of or a proof of or analysis or rigorously precise. And we know that our language is not mathematical, or it's not based on proofs, and it's not rigorously precise. So he's talking about a language that is based on proofs, because it says that we must be able to prove at all times to new converts when it's dealing with the grammatic language, right? And so it says that it must have analysis and be rigorously precise. So we have to think about, how do we speak and how precise are we in our language? So now when we start defining words, we should look at when, where did the word come from? The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was blessed with one of those good foundational educations from the Massachusetts school system.
Right. One of the last times.
Yes, gave him a classical education where he learned Latin. He said, which is a dead language. And so when he said even languages die. So the whole thing about it is that after it dies, then what comes about? Did it lose anything in translation? And oftentimes languages do lose a lot of meaning in translation. So the word mathematical or mathematics comes from a late Middle English. It says in late Middle English from Latin. The word mathematicalis from Greek, mathematikos from mathema, and the word actually means, and mathemat, it means science. So the word mathematical actually means science. And it says from the base of mathan, methanine, which means to learn. Excuse me, I don't speak any of these languages well, including probably English.
Even the fact that you were able to sound that out is going to get into what kind of the way I look at it.
Okay.
As far as even when it goes down to what is language. So, but I'll let you continue.
Okay. So, but that word, methanine, actually means learn. So it's just interesting that in our lessons it says after learning mathematics, which is Islam. So when you look at the origin of the word, it's almost a double entendre, after learning to learn. And so it's just really interesting because sometimes you have to learn to learn before you can actually learn.
Sure.
Yeah. So with that being said, another thing that we did with our children in the MUI is that we made them also know when the word came into the English language. And so understanding that this word mathematics or mathematical came into the English language around the 1800s. And over time, the word is taking on new meaning. So we're going from science. That's one of the meanings that it had. It went from learn to science to now what we understand as the study of the field of mathematics. And so next we have mathematical, something that is very precise, that it offers proof, such as a mathematical thinking, but mathematical language. So what is language by definition? And so language by definition, the spoken language, I'll just put this up front, is natural, but written language is a very unnatural thing. It's not something that you learn just by being in your environment per se. Someone has to teach you how to decompose these symbols that we call letters and put them together to make words that we assign meaning to. That's a very unnatural thing, but yet highly complex. And so here it says a language is a structured system of communication used by humans consisting of speech or spoken language and gestures such as sign language. Most languages have a visual or graphical representation encoded into symbols or a writing system composed of glyphs to inscribe the original sound or gesture and its meaning. So it says the scientific study of language is called linguistics. So we have to move from just, making sounds that have no meaning into the scientific use of language. And that is really what we want to deal with today. The scientific use of language and how, if we teach children or ourselves, really, to be honest with you, start with ourselves, to speak in such a precise way, a mathematical way, then we would have the ability to see, into people's intent, to understand people more clearly. Why do we think that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is so effective in being able to move people? It's because of his masterful command of the human language. And so with that being said, Let's go ahead and jump off into it. I want to go ahead and get you all's initial thoughts. And if you're watching us, of course, we would like for you to, of course, share. We would like for you to, if you like the content, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not a member of our community. But yeah, let's go ahead and get off into it. And please make a comment if you have one to share right there in the chat box.
Yes,
Our
we are
question.
live. We are live, and we can interact with you all live. If you are brave enough to jump into the conversation, I know sometimes that our conversations can be a bit heavy and might be intimidating, but you know, that's how you learn. You just have to jump right in. And even though you might think you're learning, even when you all bring up questions, you all bring something to the conversation that we might actually be able to learn, and you bring a different perspective, which makes the conversation that much more interesting. Because one thing I can say is, in our house, that's we can spend hours just talking, and then but in that talking, you know, all of us tend to come away with something, you know,
Right.
come away enlightened. So please add to the conversation if you have it on your heart to, and don't be afraid. This is a safe space. Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Somebody has the in the background sounds like the
I don't know if
Indianapolis
that's me,
500.
but I know I'm at a stop sign right outside of my window.
Okay.
I don't know if it's me. I have
It's
nice
all
headphones.
good.
I can't hear everything outside of my headphones.
It's all good.
But Sister Damizelle, you came off of mute, so I'm gonna let you go first. You know, I tend
No.
to be
You go ahead.
long-winded.
Go ahead.
Well, again, a lot of this, it's funny because I was getting prepared for today, just going over some things. And I'm like, oh, language is not in my wheelhouse because everybody knows, you know, I'm the mathematics, the science, physics type. But I'm like, what am I talking about? Like when I was at MUI in 5th grade, I was scoring on the college level. I was actually scoring at the highest in language.
Yes.
But I'm not flexing. But I'm trying to get to the point that I believe that I scored so high in language is because even in language, I understood that there was a science to language. And so I thought of language as a scientific process and not necessarily, a lot of us think of it as a creative process. So you know how some of us, you know, when we get into college, we're like, oh, I'm gonna be an English major because that's easy, right? But the thing is that they think that, oh, by getting into fields that are less that has less to do with calculations or any type of analyses, they think that it's easier. But I'm like, even language is a science of itself in all levels of language, whether it be spoken, even the arts. There's a certain science to music because that's a language. There's a certain science to visual art. There's a science to the colors. There's a science to everything in life, and language is probably one of the most complex sciences there is. But and then also myself, having studied multiple languages, and especially I, from time to time, whenever the opportunity may present itself and people have an interest, I might like teach Arabic. And that's one of the things that I did is at our mosque, I taught an Arabic class, an introductory Arabic class. And really what we basically covered was an introduction to the Arabic language and the alphabet. And then also the phonetics of the alphabet. And so now let's just think about language in and of itself. So
but before you go into that, Sister Gabrielle, another qualifier is that you had an inclination towards learning other languages, and you started in the 2nd grade. So you could give us a little background about that, so you could qualify what you're saying, that you didn't just look at the English language, but you've looked at other language systems and their grammar.
Oh yeah. Well, that really is an outgrowth of my interest at an early age into different cultures, and especially older, more ancient cultures. And honestly, it was from growing up watching a lot of kung fu movies. I really got into Asian culture, specifically Chinese, and then when I got into school, when I started to learn about ancient Chinese history, because instead of learning American history, I learned world history early. And so like, you can't ask me to name all 50 states and don't ask me anything about American history. I'm starting to learn that as an adult. But I was always interested in different cultures from learning from history. And then with each culture, language is a very important part of the culture, because the language itself speaks to the culture, and there's a certain history of the culture that you can find in the language, because even with each individual culture, their languages have changed over time, and they have different dialects that spring up out of that, and then those coincide with the peoples themselves, and then you can kind of trace human history by studying the evolution of language and language trees and all that good stuff. But in second grade, before I went to MUI, my mother took me out of public school. I think I was first grade, and I don't know if she was already planning this, but I remember in first grade, I used to always get in trouble because I would always finish my work early, and then I would just start talking to other people. And so literally I had all A's. I was on an honor magnet program and all that, but I used to just always cause distractions. So I'm like, Mom, I need to get out of school. I don't like it. And then next thing you know, she was like, okay, you're going to a different school. And I went to a Muslim school, international Muslim school, Bright Horizons in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And a part of the curriculum is that we have to learn Arabic. And so when I got into the class, I immediately took a not just a liking, but I had a knack for learning the Arabic language. I picked it up really quickly, the pronunciation, the written aspect of it. And so I was able to quickly rise and go to advanced levels of Arabic when I was in second through fourth grade. And so
and I'll just say this, that your instructor said, he came to me and said that said Gabby, that's what they used to call her, said understood she can speak the Arabic better than the Arabs. So, just because you grow up in something doesn't necessarily mean you have a command for it, but that just shows that her inclination towards speaking those those other languages really was, I guess ingrained into you somehow. And it could have been, like you said, from video games or whatever, kung fu movies, whatever.
Well, and honestly, it was the same thing in English, because when I was in second grade, I had this very, very strict English teacher who was actually like a PhD in English, strict Jamaican teacher. And she used to always get on me, one, because I was the only Black student in the class, and she wanted me to be the best. But again, everything was always too easy to me, and I was getting trouble like that. I'm not flexing, but the thing is that even when we had handwriting, all of the students in that grade had to write with those fat pencils, but I didn't like so, because I was so like, I had my own way of writing. If everybody know, I write really neatly, and I write like perfect print, but I write really small. And so she didn't like the fact that I would write small, and she wanted me to write exactly how she wanted me to write. But so when I would write big like she wanted to, she said my handwriting was ugly. So she said, you know what, you have an exception. You're the only one who can write with the small pencil and write your words small, as long as you keep it neat. And as far as the English language, my nickname is Gabby, and that means you talk a lot. So I don't know, maybe it's because of what you named me, that I just have this knack for languages. So even in like I was saying, in the English language, I always did well, and especially where I shined was in grammar. With all the languages, because I understood the patterns, is that if you learn the patterns and the formula for language, you'll always come out, with acceptable work. And so I really didn't excel on the creative side, but when it came to what is a
no.
Her first book report, she had an existential meltdown in second grade.
Yes. So I always
tell her be creative.
Yes, I'm totally left brain dominant. That's me. So, but I always, that's something that I really I couldn't articulate it back then, but now that I reflect on it, that's why I always excelled when it came to languages, because I understood the science of language, and that if you just put it together in the right way, you always get the right results. So grammar, syntax, punctuation, that's why I really shine, and it carried over to the different languages. So, but back to
your different languages, go ahead.
Yeah,
and just
going back to
run it down.
Arabic. So so in between fourth grade, and when I got to college, I didn't take any formal Arabic classes, but I always throughout the years would practice my Arabic handwriting, and whatever I learned in those classes, those few years that I took Arabic, I always practiced my pronunciation, and things like that. So when I got to college, actually before I got to college,
before you got to college.
Before I got to college, when I was in high school, I actually I audited a French class and an Arabic class. So I think I was a senior in high school, and so because my mother, Sister Deborah, she had a relationship with a French professor on campus. She asked the French professor, could I sit in her class and take the class? And so I'm going to class in French with college students. And this was, since French is one of the classes that you have to take, either French or Spanish, it was a full class. And so that whole time I took French for 2 semesters before I actually got into college. And the students didn't know that I was a high school student. And then even with my professor, I had the highest grade in class. And so,
and in Arabic.
Yes, same thing in Arabic. And so in the Arabic, that's something that I actually knew. French, before taking that French class, I didn't know any French. But when I took the Arabic class, that was just a repeat of what I already knew. So that was one thing. But going back to the French, so when I actually got into college and I had to get my credit for my French classes, my French professor actually let me, she actually let me not pass out, but she let me test out of the French, the first level of French classes. And what she specifically said to me is she said that your French grammar was always your strong suit. She was like, you understood French grammar, and that has to do with conjugation of verbs and putting the right the conjugation of verbs and adjectives and things like that. She was saying that you understood the grammar so well. And going back to that is really the formula for language is really, that's what you'll find in the grammar. And so when I was in Arabic, I took the second semester of Arabic when I was in college, and I actually was a tutor in Arabic. And in Arabic, I tutored a classmate of mine because she was struggling. And she was the only one that reached out because I asked my professor, can I tutor to help the students bring their grades up? I tutored her one time, and I really told her the science behind the Arabic language. And then she went from a C to an A in her classes. And I only tutored her one time. And that really, she said that really helped her really understand the language. So fast forward going back some, when I was in MUI, I also taught Arabic to the younger students. I taught the same introductory Arabic. Anything that I know, I can teach to other people. So I taught that to them. But going back to the future, which is the past now, at Muhammad 65, I taught.
But you skipped over that you took Portuguese, Spanish, all in high school. And
but that's when I was in college, I always had a love of language. Before getting into my major, which was physics, mathematics and physics, I actually wanted to study linguistics and foreign affairs. So that's what I always saw myself having to have a career in some type of different culture where I would speak the different languages of that culture. And so, but since they didn't have that at their university, I went to physics and mathematics. But while I was there, I didn't understand what the curriculum was and that you had to like do certain courses in a certain order. So I was just taking every language class that they offered at the university. And so I took
at my behest.
Yes, so I took 3
because I'm like, they're paying for it, take whatever you want to take.
Right. And so in French, I got to intermediate French, and I was actually about to do a foreign exchange program in Belgium, but it was at the time I was an undergrad, and the preference was for a graduate level student, so I didn't get that one. But I took French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic. And when I did my research in China, I also took a Chinese class as well. So, and
Twi.
Also, when I was in Ghana, I took a class, in Twi. But with all of those, same thing. I was able to pick up the language really, really quickly, and I attribute that to my understanding of the underlying formula. If you want to understand any language, there's a formula that you have to follow. And so, but going back to now me teaching language, I always get the first class, I always get this spiel about what is language. Before I even teach you any language that I'm going to teach you, I give people an understanding of what is language. And so just like you gave the definition of language, a language is a system. It's a system of sounds and symbols and the meanings that they attach to these symbols and the meanings that people attach to these words. And so really the goal of any language is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, when you understand that the baseline reason for language is communication, you won't get bogged down into the minutia of, is this right or is this wrong? The question is, did you understand what the person was trying to convey? So I talk about how there's spoken languages, there's written languages, there's unspoken languages like body languages and gestures, right? Facial expressions, hand gestures, head nods that people understand, they have a meaning. And I said, there's even the language of communication that happens that we're not aware of, such as pheromones. Our bodies are constantly communicating with each other on a microscopic level that we don't even see. And so with any language, there's going to be a transmission, because what you're trying to express is an idea, something that is abstract and that is in the mind, not in the brain, but it's in the mind. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to convey a message to another person or thing. But the thing is that you have to translate your thought, and then you go through space and time, and then it reaches somebody else or something else, and it's received. And so you have a transmitter, and then you have the actual transmission, and then you have the reception. But once it's received, if there's a problem with the transmission, or if there's a problem with the receptor, there's going to be lack of communication. So in order to be effective in communication, there has to be a clear transmission and a clear reception. And so with language, when you, by both people or both parties that are communicating, the only way that communication can happen is if they agree, right? So I said, if I'm trying to communicate a message to you and I speak English and you speak Chinese, I can talk as loud as I want to, I can go as long as I want to, and I can be as eloquent as I want to. But if you do not understand the language, right, there's no communication. As far as on what you're trying to, they might be able to pick up on the things that are universal, as in body language and gestures and things like that. But there's going to be some missing components of that. You're not going to get a complete transmission of the idea if there's that breakdown. So with any language, it only works if people agree on it. And that's what language is. It's a system of communication where the people who are involved, they agree that this means this. And if you don't have that same concept where this thing means this, you're going to have a breakdown in communication.
Right.
And so even there's many implications to that, even going to, in the spiritual realm. If you don't have the right, understanding of a person, and the right understanding of their mission, when they're doing what it is that they are going to do, you're not going to be able to recognize it because you haven't had that agreement, and you're not going to see it for what it really is. And so that even goes into why the lie that the white man has told about Jesus's identity is such a grave sin, is because by not confusing people on language, you really can sentence them to life or death based upon their understanding. And so that's just and it's the same thing with anything that we do in life. It's all based on agreement, even with time, right? If time, there's a certain language of time. 9 o'clock to you might mean that's the time that you're supposed to be at work. So if somebody comes in and changes your watch, it's going to cause you to be out of sync with time. And so you're going to have a breakdown. And so that's what you have to understand, that at the end of the day, language is about assigning meanings to symbols and properly interpreting those symbols to get their meaning. At least that's when it comes to even written language, and also a greater thing.
Yes, and I see Sister Marva. Yeah, but I'm going to let you read that. I didn't get a chance to really read it, but I want to thank you for tuning in, Sister Marva. We appreciate you. And we know that you are a special, special individual to listen to us pontificate about the minutia of language. Okay. But before we go on, as Sister Gabrielle was saying, that language is a system. Okay. And, I taught language at the collegiate level, or taught English at the collegiate level. And that's one of the things that I never go into a classroom assuming that somebody knows anything. So I take it upon myself to always review. And one of the first things, and I also was the person who did remediation for people who did not test, were not admitted to the school because they did not pass their entrance test. And so anyway, that one of the first things I would do, like Sister Gabrielle, we would agree that that the written language are symbols that we assign meaning to. But then the next thing, I would break it down in terms of that you have the symbols, then those symbols are put together, and we agree that the letters C-A-T have the sound K, and we put those sounds together and we get the word cat. Now, it's just a sound, but we associate an object or an idea with that sound. And so when you see the C-A-T together, you associate it with an image in your mind of an animal called a cat, right? And so then after we understand that these things are agreed upon conventions, the next thing I deal with is that I have them tell me anything about their life. And then I'll take what they say and I'll write a very long, convoluted sentence based upon what they said. And then, well, let me just back up just a little bit. I asked them this: what are the parts of speech? And so if you're watching this right now, please put in the chat box, what are the parts of speech? There are 8 of them, right? Put in what are the parts of speech? You would be surprised at how many people do not know the parts of speech. So if you don't know the parts of speech, it's highly unlikely that you understand the function of the parts of speech. So the parts of speech are the building blocks, if you will, the numbers, if you will, in order to put together, mathematical formula. So we go through the parts of speech, and so when we go through the parts of speech, and we talk about the function of each word, then after we understand that each word in a sentence has a function, then we can begin to construct ideas that have meaning, and that the way that they're constructed are so mathematically precise that the person that you're trying to convey the message to will not lose anything in translation.
Exactly.
And that's the idea. And so go ahead.
I just want to say, and that's so important, because a lot of times when you, as a teacher, if you're not able to break things down to their smallest component parts and really explain the function and the meaning of each thing you're doing, a lot of times you can lose the student because they might lack that motivation of why I have to learn this. And so a lot of times, it's even with anything, but say for instance with language, teaching the function of all the way going all the way down to letters in the sounds that the letter makes, and the correct way to write a letter and the correct way to spell, you encourage them to master it and do it in the right way if you teach them the power behind doing it correctly. Because again, like you were saying, with language, if you can master it, you can use it to communicate precisely and effectively, and you can get exactly what you have in your mind across to whoever you're trying to communicate to, if you understand the underlying function of each component part of that language.
And I want us to consider this. Think about how powerful this is, that what's in your mind as an idea, if you are an effective communicator, you can just imagine if there was nothing that could stop the understanding of what you're trying to communicate in your mind to somebody else's mind. Almost like instant transmission, like I'm just sending you, telepathically the image that's in my mind. And so you have to construct language in a way that creates that exact same image in the mind of another person. That's powerful. That's powerful. And so that's the power of language. So anyway, I see nobody wants to tell us yet that what are the parts of speech, the 8 parts of speech.
Hints. You can check out Grammar Rocks. If anybody knows anything about Schoolhouse Rocks,
Yeah,
that's how I master my parts of speech. And anytime
but you would have to watch each video. Yeah. But if you just start thinking about the video, that's how you get it.
Think about each video, and you will. If you remember Schoolhouse Rocks, Grammar Rocks, it'll start to doing it.
But one of the first things I asked them, I say, well, how many parts of speech are there? And that'll stump you right there. But if you don't understand that you're going to have a fundamentally hard time with language, with the precise use of language. You can fuddle around with it, but you need that to the precise use of it. So then I would come and I would write these very convoluted sentences based upon what they tell me when they introduce themselves. And then I would have them go through each word in that sentence and tell me what part of speech it is. We would write the parts of speech on the board after we would push them and coerce them to be able to come up with the 8 parts of speech. And then what we would do is that every word in the sentence, we would say what part of speech it is so they can begin to start understanding and seeing the construction of the language, seeing how these words function within the language. Now, after that, what happens is that, and this is the kicker, this is when it becomes mathematical, is construction. When we're talking about constructing language, you must, without a doubt, use sentence diagramming to teach. You could teach grammar in a week. Because if you think about it, you start learning grammar in 1st grade and you continue, that's the only course that you learn it the exact same thing every year up until about 10th grade. You could teach a dog how to speak, and they don't even live 10 years for most part, but you're teaching a human being that is the apex of Allah's creation, the same thing over and over. What's wrong with it? They've taken that out of it. That's one of the things. That's why we're not able to construct precise meaning of words. So what we do, we have some more information that's coming through from Sister Marva. Praise be to Allah. And we're going to get to you, Sister Marva. We're coming to you. We're coming to you. So anyway, that sentence diagramming is so important because what happens is that on your primary line, that is really what the sentence is about. So if you could break it down into your subject, your verb, and then your objects, direct or indirect object. Sister Marva wins the prize. Ding, ding, ding. For those who need to know what are the parts of speech, it is the noun, the pronoun, the adjective. She said the determiner, the verb, the adverb. She's putting some extra stuff in there, but the determiner we really don't use, but the verb, the adverb, the preposition, the conjunction, and interjection. There you go, Sister Marva. High five. She has it. And so that's basic information that I know we learned in about 2nd, 3rd grade, but so many of us don't know that. So anyway, once you begin to start sentence diagramming, then you can get straight to the meaning of it. So when you're studying the lessons, you must do that with the lessons. If you want to really understand what Master Farad Muhammad asked.
You had us doing that in MGT class.
That's right.
Years ago. And then what you would do is after making it into a sentence diagram, you would turn it into the statement into a question.
Yes, that's right. That's right. You have to turn the question into a statement.
Mm-hmm.
And then you diagram it. Then you can see what he's really asking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's precise language. So these are the things that we have to do if we want to begin to start mastering the language. What's so funny?
She said, "Yay."
I know, that's what I'm saying. Yay. Okay, so let's go ahead.
But
Yes,
did you
ma'am.
answer her question?
No, let's go ahead and get to Sister Marva's question. She
Okay,
has
Sister
two
Marva
things down
asked.
there.
Okay, well, I start with the second thing she put first. She said the parts of speech consist of categories to which a word is assigned in accordance with its
Function?
syntax.
Go ahead.
Function. Okay, so the question was, after you understand what language is, what is the best method to study a language, particularly if you are not in the environment where the language is being spoken?
So that's a second language that she's referring to, I think.
Ooh.
Go ahead, because I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I've taught, and this is where you start with any language. You start with the smallest part. Master the alphabet, and this is easy. Now, this is not a disclaimer, but this is a caveat. Not all languages have an alphabet. Okay, so what is an alphabet?
Okay.
In lay terms, an alphabet is the symbols that have sounds associated with them, that are the building blocks of the language, but also the order that they are customarily in. And so when you think about the English alphabet, we have A through Z, but we always learn it what? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Our letters are not arranged in random forms. So it's A first, B second, C third. But there are other languages that might have symbols with sounds associated with them, but they have no particular order. Say, for instance, like Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
There are thousands of symbols in Chinese, and even all people who speak Chinese may not even ever use some of those symbols or sounds in their life. They might not even use those in their language. And so with but again, it's no particular order that they're in either. But going back to, like, say for instance, English, which has how many letters? 26. And then they always come in the same order. Same thing with Arabic. Arabic has 28 letters, and then they always start with aleph and end with what? Yeah. And so it is always in the same order. And then each particular symbol has a sound associated with it. And then that's where you want to start with mastering, because then when you master those individual symbols or those individual letters or sounds, then you can start adding those sounds together. And when you start adding those sounds together properly, then you get a word. So when you put letters together in a particular order, they make a word. And each one of those words have a particular meaning. So you have
may I interject here? Because you said English and then you said Arabic, right? I think when you use the word constructing, it brought up the thought that how Arabic is different than, like the Romance languages, in that with Arabic, the sound that the letter makes is the sound that the letter makes. Whereas with English, you have these blended consonants, these different conventions.
But with Arabic, I don't know what the proper word for, but like when you change the little
Kesara and
harakat.
Yes.
It means movement. And so your harakat that's what's going to change your sound. And so you can think of in Arabic the harakat as in they're like vowels that we have in English. And I will even get to when I will learn the language, I'll get to that length later.
But the thing I wanted to bring up with the construction is that with Arabic, the beautiful thing of how it's constructed is that it has bi and tri-letter roots. So the words are based on roots. So when you have a root of a word like kataba, that has something to do with a book, reading, writing, library. So it's just when you change the harakat, that it changes the, like you said, the movement of the word. So Arabic is a very mathematical language, whereas English is, as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, it's like a he says it's a mongrelized or a bastard language because it has a whole bunch of languages that have been melded together. So you don't have a like you have all these different exceptions.
Right.
Like a PH makes an F sound.
Right. And
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that she said, Sister Marva, if I understand you, she said, you should master the sound and symbols first.
Yes. Master these, in another way to put it is master the smallest unit of the language first. And a lot of those, that would be considered the alphabet or the symbols themselves. So that's, and then you also have two different parts of language when it communicates. You have the spoken part, and then you have the written part. And in language in general, and even in English, even though we're used to people speaking English incorrectly, but there's even a power even speaking a language and pronouncing the words correctly, because the pronunciation is where the meaning comes from, right? Because there are people, even English language speakers, say for instance here in America, there are people who are illiterate where they cannot read a thing, but if you speak to them, they can understand it. And so the only understanding of language that they might get comes from the spoken. And if you mispronounce a word, you might lose the meaning in even mispronouncing the word. And especially from what I know, that is something that is very important in Arabic, because there's the meaning of the word really comes from the sound. And if you are off, and that's the same thing I also know in Chinese, is that they're very tone sensitive. And so by changing the tone, because it's so nuanced, by changing the tone of a word, it means a totally different thing. And one of the examples is that in Chinese, like there are many conventions where they help other non-Chinese speakers learn the language. And one of them was this construction called pinyin, which is like a Latinized version of the language. And what they have, they add in there is a pronunciation symbols, kind of like how when you learned in elementary, when you have, you have an A and you have long A.
Schwa.
Yeah, and it'll have the straight line over it, and then you have, and that's the same thing. Kind of pinyin is so they have rising tones, which when you pronounce it, you want to kind of make an inflection where your voice goes up. There's falling tones when you make an inflection where your voice goes down, and then there's rising falling tones where when you make a pronunciation, your voice goes up and down. And so we had to learn this poem about a stone lion, a stone statue lion. But the funny part of it is that it was the same sound, like sure, but you have to say it like rising, falling. You have to say it. And I'm not going to embarrass myself for anybody who speaks Chinese and hearing it, but basically the whole poem goes sure, 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 sure. So it's like it's the same thing, but based upon the inflections of your voice, it's going to change the meaning of the word totally. So when you say sure one way, it might mean lion. When you say sure, it might mean statue. And then when you say sure, it means something else. So even the sound in language is important. So when you're speaking and pronouncing words correctly, you really are able to harness the full meaning of the word and the use of the word.
Well, I want to hold it right there, Sister Gabrielle. And thank you for your questions, Sister Marva. We really appreciate them. It brings, a certain, I guess, energy to our conversation when you add in. And so what I want to do here is that with what Sister Gabrielle said, it brings us to a beautiful point that I would like to share with us. And I've written a couple of articles. And in these articles, you can find them on the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center website under the tab that deals with educational blog. And it's on the English language. And then the first one is English language number C1. And it says spelling must be used. And so it goes in the whole concept of the word or the idea of spelling must be used and what that means. And that's something that we might be able to get into at some other part. And then the next one is English lesson number C1, part 2, which deals with the language of the devils, because the message says don't use the devil's languages. And so there's a couple of things. And then we have English lesson number C1, part 3, Muslim girls must get away from reading the devil's bedtime stories to their children. But what I want to, in studying this English lesson number C1 and what the meaning of it is pointing to, there is something that was discovered. And I'm going to use two different things that I want to deal with. And one of them is there is something called, and I'm going to share this with us so we can see and get the reference for it. And it's very powerful. When I came across it, I was like, just fascinated. When we're talking about spelling, now it's interesting that we use the word spelling for a system of writing words or putting symbols in a particular order to make a word. However, instead of using the word wording for that particular activity, we use the word spelling. So then when we look at why did they use the word spelling? And if you really look into what that is, the root of the word spelling is spell. And so when you think about the word spell, if you look at it, it is dealing with what we call casting spells on someone by language. Yes, using magic and language, word magic, right? And it's very deep, very deep. So what was discovered in this research was that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talks about the Grimm's law of consonants, where you can change the consonants, exchange them for other consonants, such as he says love and life, where you change the consonants. And so what's so interesting, and I see you, Sister Marva, you're talking our language. So yes, so we have here that happened in the English language, that they actually had this high German consonant shift. So they literally start changing, back to Sister Gabrielle, what she was saying, the sounds. And so here it says the historical linguistics, the high German consonant shift, or the second German consonant shift, is a phonological development or sound change that took place in the southern parts of West Germanic dialects. And if you know about English, English is a derivative from German. German and French, many of the words are German and French, in several phases. And it probably began between the 3rd and 5th centuries, which was almost complete before the earliest written records in High German were produced in the 8th century. The resulting language of High German can be nearly contrasted with other continental Western Germanic languages, which for the most part did not experience the shift, and with Old English, which remained completely unaffected. So of course, English being derived from a Germanic root. So you have here, and if you, I don't want to go into the profundities of it, but these sounds have power. So when you're dealing with sounds within a language, and you're talking about spells, you know, there's power in the sound of the language. And so when they did this continental shift, what they did is that they took some of the inflections off of the words, or the letters in the words, which took away a lot of the power of the language. If you think about how glottal German is, German is one of my least favorite sounding languages. It will be German, and it will be Hindi, or whatever. Those they are such I don't know. It's just something about them. They're real glottal. They come way from in the back of the throat. But nonetheless, the point is that with that shift, they knew what they were doing. Because when people understood, you think about how to read and how to write, the power that was contained in the words and the sounds of the word was so important that they literally took away the power in the word by shifting the consonants away from this very forceful and powerful sound. And they did this because it is yes, I see you, Sister Marva. Yes, they did this because they understand the power in the word. And so now we have this, what we call English now, right? So what we have to do is that we have to use the language that we have for this time being until we create a new language to be able to regain our power again. And Sister Gabrielle, ma'am?
I said right.
Yes, and Sister Gabrielle is studying law, and in studying law, that's the voice, the words that you use can convict somebody or can free somebody. And so it's very powerful, when you talk about language. So there are a couple other things that I want to share with us.
But
yeah,
also,
go ahead.
But even with language and the way human beings use language, that's one of the ways that you can distinguish, man from beast, is language, because language, as I was saying, requires, it's a very complex thing that human beings do. And, in the way that they have, and like I said, the main thing that it requires agreement, and it requires really people's minds to come together and be on the same accord. As it's a little bit different with beast, is that, they move off of instinct. And even with, their certain sounds that they make, roars and things, they're more so, it's kind of, you're reading the energy that they're giving off more than really their mind. And so in a general sense, if you hear an animal roar, you know that that's a sign of danger, but there's really, you can't tweeze out the intricacies of what they're trying to say. And so all you can do is you can either, stay or leave. But as with human beings, we can get down to the details of exactly, as you were saying, painting that mental picture. And so the idea about, taking a random symbol and say that this is the sound that this symbol is going to make. And then from there, say that when you make this sound and you put this sound with this sound in this order, it means this individual thing, right? And it doesn't mean just anything, it means a very specific thing. And the same thing with symbols. Say when you put this symbol next to this symbol and this symbol in this order, it makes this sound and it means this thing. And so that's really how you make a language. And even like you're saying, making a new language is just that simple. It's not, it's not hard to think about, but it takes a lot to, how many things there are in this world? And then there's a lot of those that we don't even know. And so anytime a new thing comes into this world, whether it be physical and even the abstract things that come into this world, like how they make up new mental disorders and diseases every day, they have to give it a name. Yeah. They can't just bring it into this world and then don't name it. That's right.
It doesn't exist if it doesn't have a name, really.
Exactly. So even like with this new virus that came in, when it came in, they immediately had to give it a name, because if they didn't name it, it's almost like it didn't exist. And like as Sister Damazelle was saying, before they came up with a name for it and identified it, when she went in with the symptoms of it, they said, you're fine. You don't have anything.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so that's something, very peculiar to human beings, is our ability to name things and use language, which even goes to a biblical sense of when God, after he made Adam, he gave him that ability, that right to name things and give them their function. And even down to the minister saying that that's what he's doing now. That's the seat that he sits in, where he is able to name a thing and give it its function. And that's really, the power of Allah, is in naming a thing and giving its function, because from that point on, that's how that thing will be used in viewed once you give it a name and a function.
That's right. And people have to agree. Going back to our history briefly that we're taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the Nation of Islam, is that was really the first disagreement that man had, was the disagreement about language. And so we're taught that 66 trillion years ago, that there was this one man,
come on now,
that did not want us as a human species to speak a different dialect of this one language. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said this language was Arabic. So of course, when we begin to start changing dialects, what happens is that meaning is getting lost in translation, as Sister Gabrielle said, because some words we say in the South, say for instance, I'm just really going there, like the word ratchet. If you say ratchet to the average Caucasian person, they think you're talking about a tool.
No, they know it. No, they know it now.
They know it now.
That has been adopted.
I know it's been adopted, but the point of it is that when we first said in the Dirty South ratchet, we actually meant wretched. But now ratchet is a word that has a specific connotation. Right. Or like if I say that my eyebrows are on fleek,
that's know what
that means. That's a new word.
Yes.
So the point is that we have to agree with that, what it means. But at some point, it was a dialectical division. Yes. When that person said ratchet, they really meant wretched, but we now gave it a meaning. But if you would have said it at a certain time to somebody who was in a different area, they would have thought you were talking about a tool called a ratchet.
Right. And even going back to, like you said, when things come into the English language, it reflects on the state of humanity at the time. Not the English language, but the language itself. And so, as you said, you pointed out the historical background of that word ratchet coming into being. It came about from of a mispronunciation of a word,
dialect.
But at the same time, that also is a commentary of the state of mind of that human being that might have let you know that the human being might have been uneducated, and the person came up with the song Lil Boosie, which is a shame, because his mother was actually a school teacher. She was actually my school teacher. Exactly. Yes. His mother was my school teacher when I was like in pre-K. So it's like, but again, the fact that term came into the English language due to mispronunciation, that means that that kind of is a commentary on the state of a certain group of people, because this is a Black man in America, now, and that brings up.
But can't you see why that granddaddy Shabazz, as they call it, or God of the Moon, may have been a little weary about us using different dialects of the language, because we would have miscommunication.
Yes, and that goes back to the purpose. The ultimate goal of language is communication, and if communication is lost, that is the gravest sin of the fact that why we even talk to each other is because we're trying to communicate. And if it's not being understood what it is that we mean, it's almost like we can just be quiet. It's almost like muting ourselves. And so that's why it's important.
Really is disconnecting ourselves
from
one another.
And that's one of the what you can find at the root of most people's disagreements is some type of breakdown.
They say war is the lack of communication.
But it is I think too, the lack of communication comes out of being selfish, and all these different emotions that we may have, jealousy, envy, and things like that. Because I would say one time I was working for this guy, and he had where were these people from? It wasn't like Guatemala. What were they? I don't know.
Central America.
But they didn't speak hardly any English. And of course I don't have a second language, but we were in the house. We worked together all day. And we were just talking. They would say whatever. I don't know exactly what they were saying. And I was talking, we painting stuff, and they was like, using whatever language, saying, you want to do that part? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that part, you do that part. But we worked well together. And then, they would say certain words, and I remember at one point they was like caliente. I was like, oh, I know what that means. So, but we were talking the entire day without being lost in communication. When it was time for lunch, they and we'll say something. I'm like, yeah, let's go eat. They go downstairs, get their little lunch. I go somewhere, but we understood each other.
Yeah. That's
without
good.
understanding each other. So it had to come. That also has to come without a certain insecurity or
prejudice.
But
I think it's love. It's really love. Is maybe not love like you love that person, but it has to do something with and not an emotion, with a desire to want to understand that person.
Right, because it was
based on work. Yeah.
Right, and we never were frustrated with each other not being able to actually understand everything that we are saying. But you would think that we knew each other our whole life.
But and it's funny, like I said, I'm left brain, as you can see, and she said it was love, and my mind immediately went to the reason that you all can communicate, even with the language barrier, is because you all share something in common. As you was, and that's what I'm saying. Again, language is all about agreement. And so it's because you all both understood painting, which is, and even with every certain field of endeavor, there's a language associated with it, which is called a jargon. And so as we teach in the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, when you get into the introductory class, you're going to learn a lot of the jargon or the language that's associated with the field of education. You're going to, this word curriculum means a specific thing. The word objective means a specific thing. The word lesson means a specific thing that in lay language, it might not mean the exact thing that it means in that field. Just like in physics, speed is a very specific thing. It's a formula that you can write out. Velocity, which is very closely related, that gets interchanged, means a specific thing in the field of physics. And so with any language, there has to be some type of commonality. And one thing that you all shared, probably the most common things, that you were both human. So with humanity comes certain basic necessities of humanity that doesn't matter. You all share that in common, just like babies cry and people laugh and people sneeze and the different bodily sounds that you all share in common. And so the commonality has to be the basis of a language for it to truly be effective. And which leads to a theory that I have, because the words that the minister said about language, about the core language, and it's all a dialect of the original language, which even goes into, it's interesting that that the God that made the moon is called the God of the moon, and his whole objective was to get people to speak the same dialect of this one language. And even the messenger, he talked about that and said that it's impossible to get people to speak the same dialect, because your dialect is affected off of regional geographic geographic differences, and climate. And so of course you might say, oh, well, you live in the South and the heat and the da. And I'm like, that's one way to look at it, which is probably very much correct, because language is affected by our organs and things like that, the organs of speech, our mouth, shape of our mouth, the shape of our noses, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I was thinking, again, me being the science mind, the original language being the language of the universe or the language of the stars, because going back to what's something that all human beings share in common, we live on the same planet. But based upon where on that planet we live, we're going to see a different thing when we look up at the night sky, right? We're going to see a different thing when we look up at the sky. So if you live in the southern hemisphere, do you understand that your whole, as they say, the zodiac is reversed? So if in the north, you might be a Virgo. If you live in the south, you're going to be whatever is on the opposite side of a Virgo, an Aries or something like that. And so literally based upon your geographic location on the planet, you're going to have a different outlook or a different view of this universal language. So, at 10 o'clock your time, you might see, this certain set of constellations in the sky, but if you live on another part of the planet, it's going to be slightly different based off of that location. And so it's literally impossible for everybody to see the same thing. But now check this out. If you're trying to geolocate, you're trying to send somebody a message, if you're trying to say, this is where I am, but you're trying to send it in the time before there was cell phones and things like that, you're trying to send a message to somebody else, where is your location? You're going to write something, right? And you send that message to them, and they can probably figure out where you are based upon that. But when everybody's going to be different, but when you add the moon to the picture, the moon, you literally can triangulate where you are. So if you write this picture and you say, I see the moon in the first quarter, as opposed to somebody who said, well, when I saw it at the same, I saw this part of the moon, then it's like the moon adds, some point in the sky where everybody can reference,
it's like a clock where you have the hands that are the hour hands could be like the constellations, and the moon can almost be like the second hand where it gives you more refinement of your location.
Yes. And so the moon, when you introduce the moon, that changes the language, the universal language, because again, prior to 66 trillion years ago, there was no moon. So if you're trying to use this language of the astrological bodies, as we talked about in problem number 13, which is, one of the possible meanings of the 26 letters and the 10 numbers, without the moon, it wouldn't be 10, because you think about it, when you're looking from the sky, you don't see Earth. So Earth is not going to be a part of that.
The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said the universe was the Big Ten. So he did say that.
And the sun, moon, and stars are planets.
Yeah, something that's grown from the beginning. Well, as I want to get back, we kind of went off a little track, but we're going to get back to this point just a little bit. And that is about, we're still on language. And we were talking about the 66 trillion years ago and the, how that that was the first division of language 66 trillion years ago, according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I want to bring up the article, because I thought this was something that was worth sharing with our audience in the article. And this is from the first article that was written. And this, of course, like I said, has to do with English lesson number C1. But going back to the word spell, I know the text is a little small, but I'm sure your eyes are better than mine. However, says that
you should be able to zoom on your browser.
Let's see. I'll go ahead and zoom on my browser. I know how to do that. Okay. So here we go. So what is English language? As I was alluding to earlier, English is a West Germanic language that was first spoken in early medieval times, named after the Angles. Now what Sister Gabrielle was talking about, history, the history of the moon. So language and history, we really were looking at possibly doing those both together, but we'll have to save that for another time. But this is history that is, also has to do with language, the history of language. Every subject has a history component to it, everyone. And so it was named after the Angles, one of the Germanic tribes that migrated to England. It ultimately derives its name from Angeli Peninsula in the Baltic Sea. In the history of Europe, the Middle Ages or the medieval period lasted from 01 AD to 1500 AD. It began with the fall of the Western Roman Empire and merged into the Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. Now, this is where I want to bring that. I want to hone in on that. It was Germanic. Okay, so we were talking about this Germanic shift, this consonant shift. So the first word in the above statement from Master Farrakhan Muhammad that I would like to draw your attention to, I say, is the word spelling in relationship to the English lesson. Spelling must be used, he says. And it says this statement is a command. He said it must be used. What is spelling and how does this relate to the narrative of Master Farrakhan Muhammad's uncle? The root of the word spelling is spell plus the suffix ing. Taken as a noun, the definition of the word spell in Old English is a story, a saying, a tale, a history, a narrative, a fable, a discourse, or a command. In Gothic, spill meant a report, discourse, tale, fable, or myth. A spell is known as an utterance, something said, it has to be verbal, a statement, a remark, meaning a set of words with a a supposed magical or occult power, an incantation or a charm. Okay, and this meaning was first recorded in 1570, and hence spell is any means or cause of enchantment. So when we're looking at that word spell, he says spelling must be used. So the term is generally used for a magical procedure which causes harm. When you're talking, that's what it generally means now, or force people to do something against their will. Also in Old English, a spell is a doctrine or a sermon or a religious instruction or teaching, the gospel or a book in the Bible. So spell also means to find out by studying or come to understand. It is a spoken word or form of words held to have magical power or a statement of enchantment. And a spell is a strong, compelling influence or attraction. Now, I just wanted to deal with that. Now, we're talking about attraction, right? And Mr. Yaqub was the founder of Unlike Attracts and Like Repels. But here, I want to get down to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that I thought it was so deep. Because when you read stuff and then you go back and read it again, it was like, wow. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about Yaqub's curse, because when you're talking about spelling, you in the modern vernacular, you're talking about putting letters together in a certain order to give or make a word that has meaning. But when you're writing it, the first form of writing comes in what we call traditional script, or we call it cursive. So the question is, why do we use the word cursive when we're talking about, writing in the written form a word or spelling a word? You use cursive writing. And when we write our Savior's letter, we write it in a cursive script. Just some interesting stuff. And so the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about Yaqub's curse. Excuse me. And it says in Our Savior Has Arrived, it says, the curse of Yaqub and his people veils all the earth and the atmosphere of the earth. How might Mr. Yaqub have gone about keeping his promise or his oath? Because that's, when you're talking about a curse, you're invoking something that is harmful or injurious on someone. So it's just really, really deep when we get into language. We talked about language has the ability to free you, or language has the ability to enslave you. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I see page 120. I need to go look that up immediately because my mind's, I need to look that up immediately.
The curse of Yaqub?
Yeah, man, you have my mind going.
Well, praise be to Allah. It's so much in here, but we want to deal with language. Language is so important, and we have to think about, and I encourage us to go back and look at this information. And I put down here that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad continues on, and our Savior has arrived on page 125. After the removal of the curse of Mr. Yaqub, there will be a new way of thinking by a new God. He is superior to all the other gods who existed before him. The power of heaven and earth will submit to his power, and the change is made easy and inevitable. For the heavens and the earth are controlled by the God of the black man, Allah, who came in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, to whom all praises are due forever. But then you have spelling, putting words together. Then you have the writing of the word called cursing. But then why do they use the word when you put words together that give meaning to a concept? They call it a sentence. A sentence. So you're cursed and then you're sentenced. Think about that. So we have to really just start thinking about that. And it says, the next time we intend to go deeper, okay, we want to examine and the next thing I examined the whole thing about handwriting and using words to form sentences. And so there's something really, really profound in that we go into in this article. So I'm asking you all to take a look at it, and we go into language and sentence and so on and so forth. But there is that is the one more thing about the nefarious side of it. In our English lesson number C1, we're taught by Master Farrakhan Muhammad that his uncle, who's over here in North America, was brought over by the trader 379 years ago from the time of this writing. Says my uncle cannot talk his own language. And so he talks about the uncle cannot talk his own language. And then he goes down and another one, it says, why does he fear, referring to the uncle, now since he's a big man? And the answer is because the devil taught him to eat the wrong food. And he says, does that have anything to do with the above question number 10? And then it says, yes, sir, that makes him other than his own self. And so he could not speak the language properly. He could not interpret what was going on with him properly. And so what the enemy was able to do through both language, by doing things like calling himself master and changing the names of people. You know, we know the story of Kunta Kinte, and it says, your name is Toby. So he changes the names, he changes the words, all of these different things. And what that does is that changes the mind. That's the curse of Yaqub, which Master Farrakhan Muhammad comes to undo this curse. So I want to just look at two things, and then I'm going to let you all make your final comments, and then we're going to go on home with that. But we talked about this earlier in our podcast when I had come across this called Old Deluder, that means like a trickster, Satan Act of 1647. And it had to do with really about education. And I just want to bring this up again because we're going back to the whole thing about that, his uncle could not talk his own language. And in not being able to communicate with with other people like him, his brothers and his sisters, and not really understanding what the enemy was telling him, he was able to trick him. And so this Old Deluder Act, the Puritans, many of them were abolitionists. and they didn't believe in the institution of slavery for Black people, I guess, and I guess anybody else. But anyway, this is back again in Massachusetts, where education really first started. Compulsory education started back in Massachusetts, where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan got his basic education, very good education from. But this is a law that was on the books. And it says Massachusetts passed the Old Deluder Act in 1647, laying the base for the public schools in America. The Puritans valued literacy highly, and they believed that all individuals should be able to read and interpret the Bible for themselves. In 1642, Massachusetts had required parents to ensure their children's ability to read. And 5 years later, in this act, the state mandated community schooling. But this is what basically the Old Deluder Act was about. And let me see if I can find the actual script. I thought it was on this. It's not on here, but it goes something like this, that in order, oh, here it is. It says right here, it says the religious basis of the act was explicit. The act stated its intention was to thwart ye old deluder Satan in his goal to keep men from knowledge of ye scriptures. So that's what it was, because the scriptures, as we're taught, are written by the original man in 25,000 years in advance of it happening. So if you cannot interpret the scriptures properly, you really can't read history properly. So then whoever can read history properly has the ability to trick you by changing up the different elements of history. And of course, trapping you or making an interpretation, as the English lesson number C1 says. So going back to, now that's the negative side of language. Going back to the positive side of language here, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan found Sister Gabrielle. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says here, he says, and this comes from this very important document, which really is part of the new book, probably the introduction to the new book, which is called, I'm doing like George Bush, huh? I had the book upside down. But anyway, this is called Closing the Gap. Interviews of the heart, mind, and soul of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that was compiled by Brother Minister Jibril Muhammad. But he asked him a question about communication. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says here that he stated that Allah gives every creature the ability to communicate with his own, to be able to share with other members of his species what its aim, what it desires, what its desire is, and the fulfillment of the natural inclination of the species. The highest manifestation of communication is language, the minister says, that he gives to human expression, to humans to express its desires, its concerns, its needs, its disappointment, its frustration. But of all its but it is all manifested through language. The art of communication is lost among human beings. I guess the Tower of Babel and the confusion of language is demonstrative of the chastisement of Allah in disallowing human beings to be able to communicate at the highest level. With us as a people that were taken from our original language and culture, we have developed skill in communicating through various means, sometimes other than language. But the highest form of communication is language that is used to communicate the wisdom of God. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said the art of communication is a lost art among human beings. So here we see that language is both an art and it is a science. And so what we say in the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center is that we must learn the art and sciences of language. And one more thing, I'm going to share the screen again that I want to bring up before we close out is I have here a quote. Let me see if this is the book. A quote from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad from the book Our Savior Has Arrived about language. As this document is opening, we'll come back to that one. We should have really gone there first, but we usually end out with that. And we're just about on time. We started 30 minutes later, so than we normally do. But this is from Our Savior Has Arrived. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about language and language that is coming in this new world. If you're going to have a new education, do you think that you can express Allah's wisdom with the devil's language? Okay, I think y'all thought that was funny.
And can you please ask that question one more time?
Okay, well, let me put this all the way on whatchamacallit. So everybody, can you have a new education and going into the hereafter using the language of the devil? Is that possible?
No. That's not what you said.
What did I say, Sister?
Say what you said. No. Can you express Allah's wisdom with the devil's language?
Oh, okay. No.
What?
Can't do it.
Wow.
Can't do it. So it's impossible. So it's impossible. So you can't have a new education without a new language. It's just impossible. We're doing the best we can. We're fuddling through it by trying to express these big ideas with very imprecise language. Well, for me, it's imprecise. Other people.
I mean, but that's what studying would help further that.
Yes, and that's why your babies and your babies will be speaking. I mean, they're already. You all are already speaking different languages.
Yes, and I was gonna say, I have to say, my child is coming up with her own language.
And she should.
Yes,
and I think her cousins are too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. So question is, why did Master Farrakhan Muhammad study those different languages? Was it just so he can be, smart?
A polyglot?
Or was it maybe that he was trying to come up with a new language that was universal?
Mm-hmm. So let's see what oh, my page is okay. Here it is. Oh, y'all can't see it yet. Let me share it because when he says Our Savior has arrived, that's it to me. That's why this is my favorite book, because it goes straight into the new world. I'm trying to get there. I mean, I know that I'm can't put new wine in the old wineskin, but well, I still want to go. Nonetheless,
but you will. You will.
Yes.
Your
if I don't make it.
Exactly. And that's how you make it.
Okie dokie. Here we go. Let me see if this is the right place. I thought it would save my place, but it didn't. So it's going to be around here somewhere. So please be patient, you all. I should have written the page number down. But no, I'm close. This book is deep, and chapter number 23, He Allah makes all things new, is heavy. And he says we're going to have a new education. Okay, I think this is it. Hold on, everyone. For some reason it's loading slowly. Okay. Give me just a second. And in short, this what he talks about is a new language. So he is going to say that we will have a new language. And the only way that you can really get a new language, okay, is further than this. You got to have a new mind. Okay, we're right there. I remember reading this. Okay, new education. I think it's this page right here. Okay. Okay, this is it. And I'm not going to read all of it for time's sake. But he says here that the God of righteousness must remove the white race's way of civilization altogether and build upon a new foundation. As I keep repeating, he says, the mind of the people must be so conditioned into a way of thinking that the new world that we must not think in terms of the new world being a part of another old world. Even your education, he says, of this wicked world will not be part of the education of the new world. He says, I think that you are thinking that I am going too far now. However, no education of this world of the white race will be accepted into the new world. For the new world, you will have a new education and a new government. The God of the new world is a new God. He is not the God who ruled from the beginning, but he has the same idea that the God in the beginning had to create something new. And I'm going to skip over this. And then it says Allah God makes it very easy in the next life, that new life. You will be happy all the days of that you are in it. The Holy Quran teaches that he causes the righteous to grow into a new growth. The basis or pillar of that new world is when our old mind has been changed into a new mind, or our thoughts are changed into a new mind, or our thoughts are changed into a new thought, or a new way of thinking, which brings about a change of the whole body. He says, in the new world, you will not even be able to speak the English language. The speaking of the English language will be stopped, he says. No language of the wicked should be spoken by the righteous, as there are some in Islam, he says, in the Orthodox Muslim world, whom I have met myself, and they refuse to speak English, for it is an infidel language. This is the truth. English is a bastard language, for it is a language that is made up of other languages. It is not a dependent language. So we see here why it is necessary for us to have a new language. So with that being said, that's one of the courses that's in the school, is a priority. And that's teaching children, if you know the basics or the constructs of language, that's how you can build new language. When we went to Malaysia, if you looked at the Malay handwriting, it looked similar, very similar to Arabic. But when we were speaking to the brother in the masjid, he was like, we use the Arabic symbols, but we made up our own language with the Arabic symbols. How profound is that? And we have that capability. And he said we can't take anything of the English language, but I think music would be a beautiful language for us to write in, because music is mathematics. But just think about, what would a new language look like? How would you teach a child in such a way that you can have them start thinking in a mathematical way to construct a brand new language, a language set? How does that look? And that's what linguistics is about. So that's one of the things in the school of mathematic language that is taught, is linguistics. The minister said in our opening video about root languages. I think he said there are about 10 root languages. And he said that we should master English, we should learn Arabic, we should learn French. He said you could communicate with most of the people in the world learning those languages. But now he said you also should add Chinese and Spanish to those. If you can learn those languages, English, Arabic, French, Chinese, and Spanish, or Spanish and Chinese, you can communicate with probably 90% of the people on this planet. So then what would be a universal language? A lot of people are learning Mandarin Chinese, and many people have learned how to speak English because it's a language of money, of commerce. So with that being said, closing comments. I see you looking up something, Sister Gabrielle.
No, I was just would like to say, there's much to be learned in the words, right? Because that's how we essentially get our ideas across. So even with mastering the English language, we can even understand more so what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is trying to impart to us when he gives us, these directives to study, his words, and even down to the Savior's Day gift that he's given us this year. And he wants us to study the criterion. So, parsing the words is a start, but go back, and really understand the purpose of language, and then you might even find out more things.
Okay, well, I can't leave out without us, thank you, without us going into the curriculum. And then, for those of you that hung in with us, we thank you. And for those of you all that had to click out, you could come back and pick it up later. Let's go ahead and look at this curriculum, and then we are going to close it out. And here we go, the School of Mathematic, Language, Arts, and Sciences. And we have some introduction here, of course, by Mother Tainetta Muhammad, and going into this whole concept of language and this language of the supreme wisdom. It's just really heavy, you all. So I would suggest that you go back and take a look at these quotes, but let's get into the curriculum itself. So the School of Mathematics, Language, Arts, and Sciences is a school of language and communication. Mathematical language, arts, and science is a scientific system of communication with its own set of conventions and special words. The base of the language is taken from the Supreme Wisdom Lessons by Master Farad Muhammad. See problem number 13. And it says the average man speaks 400 words considered well. It is the range of reading, writing, research skills taught at Muhammad University of Islam and are designed to give students mastery of the English language and their second and third languages, Arabic, Spanish, or French, including all forms of written and verbal expression. The student outcomes. It is the initial objective of this curriculum called Mathematics, Language, Arts, and Science, is to have each student to master his or her first language as they master their second and third language of their choosing. It is a further goal for the students to begin to develop a new language based on mathematical concepts and truths, such as in Arabic with its bi and tri-letter root words. And as over a period of years, English as a first language will be replaced by a language that is altogether new as the students become immersed in Arabic as their first language. This process may take up to 20 years after the initial implementation. So let's go ahead and go down because we have a lot of references here. because the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said he wanted Arabic to become our first language. So we have the Department of English Language. So here we have temple reading. We have letter recognition, phonics and music, sound recognition, sight words, vocabulary, words, spelling, recitation, and diction. As you see over here to the right, this is from prior to 75. It says students attend school 50 weeks a year, and they start Arabic lessons in 3rd grade. And 50 weeks, if you remember, we have 52 weeks, so that's all year. Just to, bring that on home. So they went to school all year round, for real. So grammar, we would have sentence and sentence structures, parts of speech, sentence diagramming, composition, types of composition, proofreading and editing, creating, and portfolio building. Literature, we would study world literature, biblical literature, scriptural literature such as Sufi, Eastern, and holy writings, poetry, interpreting and composing. The Department of International Languages, it is recommended that all Muslims learn Arabic and teach it to our babies as a first language and English as a second language, which will be taught starting at 4 years old. So you have Arabic language, you have reading, as Sister Gabrielle said, letter recognition, phonics, sight words, vocabulary, root word meaning, spelling, recitation and diction, grammar, parts of speech, phonics, sight words, vocabulary, and diction. And then in grammar, sentence structure, sentence structure, and parts of speech. So you have your Department of Writing Systems. So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, when we teach a child the letter A, we should also teach them the corresponding number 1. So this is actually a scientific system of code building and so or cryptography. So to be able to decode, especially a lot of this ancient writing, they've even found that they have a Bible code that's in the first 5 books of the Bible that is coded in there. And also the Holy Quran is coded with the number 19. So if we start teaching our children how to break codes when they're reading the scripture, they can break these ciphers of these codes as they're going into especially the more archaic writings. And then they could, of course, begin to start building code themselves. And this is the Pythagorean numerology, which deals with the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, A1, B2, so on and so forth. Of course, many of your ancient languages has a number letter correspondence, such as the Roman numerals are numbers and also letters. And so that's why, we get a decade, which is 10, deci, and so on and so forth. And in Arabic, you also have a numeral letter system. And they have one, it's called abjad in Arabic and gematria in Hebrew. And so we should teach our children this. This is what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. And also other number systems such as the I Ching in Chinese. And so there's the word that Sister Gabrielle said, the pinyin. So she was talking about the Chinese kanji. Yes, the letters.
Kanji is Japanese, but the kanji symbols, they got those from Chinese.
Okay, so the symbols, so this is what she was saying. This letter right here, this word is pinyin or whatever, is written out in a, so that's what she was talking about. So we should learn of other ancient letter number systems. And even going back to ancient Egyptian or Egypt, which is called Kemet, they had a system of writing that the Greeks called it hieroglyphs, but it's called the metanetur, which they had symbols. So we should learn how to read that. And so, and then the Department of Linguistics. I was listening and I heard that, listening to, I can't remember exactly who it was, but they said that this particular book was one of the 104 books that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was given to read by Master Fard Muhammad. And if anybody has any references or any other thing that they can add, please add it in the comment section. But this book is called Anacalyptus, an inquiry into the origin of languages, nations, and religions by Godfrey Higgins. And I found this online. This is one of these books that if you try to buy it, it may cost you $5,000 to buy it. It's one of these books that's out of print and it's written in that early, 20th century English or late 18th century English, which is very difficult to interpret. But it's something that if we learn how to read, then this is something that we can read. But look at what it says. Anacalyptus, attempt to draw aside the veil. And it says the Sadiq Isis, an inquiry into the origins of language, nations, and religions. So this book was published in 1836. So it's not the early 20th century, it's more the early 19th century writing. And so anyway, we have applied linguistics, we have lexicon, discourse, dialect, we have the structure of linguistics. So just studying linguistics, syntax, study the great vowel shift as we talked about. And lastly, a priori. A priori is linguistics of a constructed language developed entirely from scratch without deriving it from an existing language. So that's something that can be taught to our children, how to construct a language. And then this is the last department, I believe, is just the Department of Telepathic Communication. And I know people think that telepathic is all the stuff is fanciful or mythological and whatnot, that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that the righteous could, he called it the radio in the head, but he said the righteous have these abilities. And so we have courses cleaning up and purifying the body and mind for telepathy, because that's one of the prerequisites according to what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us. And back in the early 20th century, they had this new awakening called the School of New Thought. Very interesting. And the reason that I put this article in the curriculum, because embedded in here, I saw something as I was doing my study, and I saw them use the word supreme wisdom. And that just piqued, of course, my curiosity. And it's not just that they use the word supreme wisdom, but they use supreme wisdom with the capital S and a capital W. And I'm like, and if you look at it, here it is right here, supreme wisdom. So I just thought that that was interesting. And so that we put that in there to look at. So those are the schools that are within the School of Mathematic, Language, Arts, and Sciences. And so, of course, we always have our standards, and then we have what the grade level expectancies are within each one of these levels. So with that being said, I would like to thank any of you who stayed with us until the end, because we know that sometimes it does get a bit lengthy, but these podcasts are more meant to go back and look at over time. Because what we want you to do is that we want you to dig into what we're presenting here and to expand it, extrapolate it, take it to the next level, add on to it, because we know that what we've been given is, I mean, if somebody, unfortunately, I don't have my hard copy, but this is an actual copy of the Supreme Wisdom that we had to photocopy. But if somebody told you that this was the door to the new world, the hereafter, that if you just went into it, that you can go into a whole new world of peace, where a world where we all could live together in peace, wouldn't it be worth trying to, plumb the depths of what we've been given? And so what we're offering here is just a conversation for us to have, that we can begin to start, uncovering, scratching the surface of this new world that comes, through this new education. We're not saying we have the new education. What we're saying is that this is the new educational paradigm, the supreme wisdom. And we're really encouraging all of us, especially those who are registered members in the Nation of Islam, that this is how we're going to get there. We have to go through the door of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to get to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who is the door to Master Farad Muhammad, who's the door out of this entire world of the mind of Yaqub. And so we're just saying that go back and listen at some, if any one of these things that we talked about have piqued your curiosity, go deeper. Go deeper. Research. We live in the information age. There is no reason for any of us to be ignorant about anything. And most of what we saw that we've shared, it started with something, thus saith the Lord. Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, or Master Farad Muhammad in his writings. And then we just went after searching for it, researching, because we know if we settle on that this is the truth and we believe it, just go after proving it. Don't even go after trying to, disprove it. Go after proving it, and the answers will be there. It's guaranteed. And so we have to get back into the study, the research. We think that all of a sudden that we smart Muslims now because we have smartphones, right? But a smartphone don't make you smart. It probably makes you a little more dumb. However, the Muslims during the time of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad were doing some serious research. As the minister said, they would take them down to the museums, doing that empirical research, having to go to libraries. Can you imagine? I want to find out something about the teachers. I have to actually get in my car and drive to the library. That means I really want to know that. So the point is that let us become Muslims that love the teachings enough to go into the teachings. And so, of course, if you enjoyed what we had to share, if you thought that it was insightful, please give us a thumbs up. Share with someone who you think that would benefit from this content. If you're not a subscriber of this community, we ask you to please become a subscriber of this community. We try to upload, information that only builds on what we are saying in these podcasts to give it more flesh. We are taking enrollment for our next teachers orientation class, which will begin on March 8th. And so you can, of course, go to our website at www.supremewisdomeducationalcenter.org, and you can register for the class. And we are having a workshop, a webinar, actually, that will be on how to develop a SWC lesson plan. SWC stands for Supreme Wisdom Curriculum Lesson Plan. And that will be on March, it's on a Sunday. Let me see the exact day. That will be on March the 21st. March the 28th. Let me exactly see. I want to give you half truths or hyperboles. I want to give you actual facts. March 20th. Yes, I was correct. So March 20th, it will be a 4-hour webinar where, and the seating is limited. We only have 30 seats available because I want to be able to give one-to-one, one-on-one coaching with those who sign up for the class. The course is $55, and you can go to the website and you can sign up, and we would love to have you join us, and we will walk you step by step in how to develop a lesson plan based on the Supreme Wisdom lessons. In particular, I'll tell you that it will be based upon the student enrollment rules of Islam, question and answer number 1, who is the original man? And we'll take you through how to develop an integrated and a thematic lesson plan. So if you're interested in that, if that's something you're interested in, or you know somebody who might be interested in it, please share with them. And like I said, that will be March 20th. It's on a Sunday. It's a 4-hour webinar, and I know that you will enjoy it.
Sunday is the 21st.
It's the 21st. So it's March the 21st. Thank you. It's on a Sunday. So yes, with that being said, I think that we are just about done. So may Allah continue to bless you. And please just keep tuning in. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum.